welcome to Killian Baptist Church Online. My name is Pastor Chris Reynolds, and I am so glad that you are tuning in with us. If you are tuning in for the first time, a special welcome to you. We have our digital connect card link in the comments below, or you can go to killianbaptist.org/connect. And if you'll just take a moment and fill that out so that we can continue to stay in touch with you. Also, when you fill out that card, we'll send you a gift through your email inbox, and it's a free subscription to something called Right Now Media. It's like a Christian Netflix of sorts. Our heart is to continue to build community and share God's love even when our physical location is empty. So thanks again for worshiping with us this morning. Let's pray together real quick. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for another opportunity, another day for us to be able to gather together and hear from you. I pray that you would speak words clearly to those that are listening, that you would communicate to their hearts, and that your name would be lifted up as they seek to submit and seek to turn their lives over to you more and more day by day. Father, I ask all of these things in your precious Son's name. Amen.
strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. Lord, now indeed I find thy power and thine alone can change the leper's spots and melt the heart of stone. Jesus made it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. And when before the throne I'd stand in kingdom plea, Jesus died my soul to save. My lips shall still repeat, Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow.
Once again, we are glad that you have chosen to worship with us online. Today, we're continuing our Recalculating series where we're answering the question, how does God want us to respond when life changes? Not if, but when life changes. Today, we're zeroing in on the fear factor that happens when the certainty of what we know begins to shift under our feet. Today, to do this, we're going to be examining the example that the children of Israel give in response to arriving at the land that God had promised them. They saw obstacles and huddled in fear instead of holding on in faith. Therefore, with that being our trajectory this morning, will you please join me in the reading and the proclamation of God's holy, inspired, infallible, and inerrant word from the book of Numbers in chapter number 13. The book of Numbers, chapter number 13, and I'm going to begin reading in verse number 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Send men to scout out the land of Canaan I am giving to the Israelites. Send one man who is the leader among them from each of their ancestral tribes." Go down to verse number 17. When Moses sent them to scout out the land of Canaan, he told them, "Go up this way to the Negev, then go up into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. Verse number 19. Is the land they live in good or bad? Are the cities they live in encampments or fortifications? Is the land fertile or unproductive? Are there trees in it or not? Be courageous. Bring back some fruit from the land. It was the season for the first ripe fruit grapes. So they went up and scouted out the land. Verse number 26. The men went back to Moses and Aaron and the entire Israelite community. They brought back a report for them and the whole community, and they showed them the fruit of the land. They reported to Moses, "We went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey, and here is some of its fruit. However, the people living in the land are strong, and the cities are large and fortified." We also saw the descendants of Anak. The Amalekites are living in the land of the Negev. The Hethites, the Jebusites, the Amorites living in the hill country, and the Canaanites live by the sea along the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people in the presence of Moses and said, "Let's go up now and take possession of the land, because we can certainly conquer it." But the men who had gone up with him responded, "We can't attack the people because they are stronger than we are." So they gave a negative report to the Israelites about the land they had scouted. "The land we passed through to explore is one that devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw in it are men of great size. We even saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, come from the Nephilim. To ourselves we seem like grasshoppers, and we must have seemed the same to them." Now continue on to chapter 14 and verse number 1. Then the whole community broke out into loud cries, and the people wept that night. All the Israelites complained about Moses and Aaron, and the whole community told them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if we had only died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into the land to die by the sword? Our wives and children will become plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" So they said to one another, "Let's appoint a leader and go back to Egypt." God, may you bless the reading and the proclamation of your word. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be glorifying in your sight. And may I preach as though never to preach again, as a dying man to dying men. In your precious son's name, amen. Wow. What else is there to say? When you think about the origin story of the children of Israel and how they began with this old man and old woman having a child in their old age, then growing into a small family through the 70 descendants of Isaac, and then getting pushed into the land of Goshen outside of Egypt and growing to 2.5 million over 430 years, and then their glorious exit out of Egypt, and then the parting of the Red Sea, the provisions from God from heaven, the water flowing from rocks in the desert, the delivery of the Ten Commandments, the people seeing the Shekinah glory of God on the face of Moses, and then the final arrival to the promised land, which Abram was promised all those years ago. You can only just say, wow. But it's even a larger wow that the children of Israel got there and they refused to go into the land. But the question for us this morning is, what stopped them? Well, let's take a look at it here. Initially, we see that the spies are sent out into the land. Now, the sending of these spies, they're meant to energize the people, not necessarily to provide military intelligence in advance of an invasion. We know this because they were chosen from each of the 12 families as representative to go. If you're going to choose to trust someone, oftentimes it's going to be family that you choose to trust their word. Therefore, these spies are being sent out that they might take note of all of the beauties of the land. Yeah, they took note of the military stuff, but they were taking note of all the beauties of the land. There was large, ripe grapes that are on the vine, and there was these large vines, and there was large pomegranates and figs, and there was an abundance of fertile soil, and there was plenty of food and plenty of provisions. As they said, it was flowing. It was a land flowing with milk and honey, which is a descriptive term which meant that their refrigerators were going to be stocked. This would have been a big motivator for those that had heard them give this message, because they had been living in some pretty rough conditions and rough provisions over the last little bit. So initially, as they're giving this report, everyone's eyes would have been wide open, their mouths would have been wide open and watering at the possibilities of moving forward. Discussions beginning to break out in the crowd, and the people beginning to talk back and forth excitedly, and then Caleb quieting the crowd down and declaring, "Let's go up now and take possession of the land, because we can certainly conquer it." Initially, I'm sure that some people would have cheered. I'm sure that there would have been excitement. But that excitement was short-lived, because the 10 of the other spies, they pushed their way to the front of the crowd, and they said, "Wait, wait, wait." Then they proceeded to tell the people that the land would devour them. They began to tell the people that all the people that are in the land were stronger than they are. They began to tell the people that in the land the Israelites would have looked like grasshoppers. And then you know how it goes from there. Families begin talking back and forth and embellishing over what they've heard, and their familial representative has told them. And then the next thing you know, the whole trip has gone absolutely downhill. And it's like 100 times worse than a National Lampoon Vacation, because grandma didn't die in the backseat. The whole generation is going to die. See, the whole community begins to cry out, and the people begin to weep. And they wept all night long. And their complaint was to Moses and Aaron, but really it was about God. They said, "If only we had died in Egypt, or if we'd only died in this wilderness, things would have been so much better. God, why did you bring us here to die by the sword? Hey, maybe we should appoint another leader, and he'll take us back to Egypt." I mean, really? I mean, seriously. This is what you're saying? You walked across dry land in the middle of the Red Sea. You watched God obliterate the entire Egyptian army like that. The whole thing, chariots, horsemen, men on foot, taken care of. You've seen hailstones fall from the skies, frogs flooding the rivers. You've seen rivers turn to blood. You've seen God do wonders. And now you're upset because you might have to face some people that have been eating their Wheaties? You've got God on your side. You want to go back to death? You want to go back to slowly dying? You want to go back to disease and disparity and depression and servitude and destruction? Why? Well, why did they? It was because of fear. See, fear hijacked their minds. It then infiltrated their hearts, and then it took over their bodies. They gave themselves over to the fear. Well, what made them afraid? What made them afraid was their own weakness. See, they put more trust in their weakness than in God's strength. When they heard the report from their relatives, it said, "The people in the land are stronger than we are," they said, "My weakness cannot overcome their strength." When what they should have said is, "My God is able. He has brought us here. He has provided. He has protected. He has initiated. He has carried through what it is that he said. My God is able. Therefore, his might will continue to seize that which he has promised. My God is able." But they put more trust in their weakness than in God's strength. They put more trust in their past accomplishments than in their present opportunities, in their past circumstances than in the present moment that they were in. They said, let us go back to Egypt. In fact, let us bring someone that will take us back into what we were before. Yeah, we see the promised land out in front of us, but we're going to walk away from that because it scares the mess out of us. Therefore, I'd rather be comfortable in knowing and being involved in the known than moving into a place of the unknown. This morning, as life is steadily shifting under your feet and the world is changing around you, how are you responding to that change? Are you fearful? Before you answer, let me point something out. The people's fear manifests itself in another way as well. How was that? It manifested itself in anger. The Israelites complained about Moses and Aaron. They were livid. See, when fear takes root in your heart and my heart, we begin kicking and screaming and yelling and fighting. Why? Because we're trying to hold on to the door frame to keep whoever or whatever is dragging you through the door. See, when life is changing underneath your feet, you are fearful and angry because you're too busy looking at the obstacles and saying, this is too hard for me. Or maybe you're looking at the obstacles and you're saying, why don't we just go back to where we were before? Why don't we just return to that previous age? Church, that's not an option for us. Christian, that's not an option for us. We have to recalculate away from fear because of our own weakness or because of our own anxieties about the future. And we have to start focusing on the place where God has brought us to walk into. One more thing I need to point out, and I briefly mentioned it a few moments ago. This was the Lord's response to the people rejecting his way. Look down at verse number 22. None of the men who have seen my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tested me these 10 times and did not obey me, will ever see the land I swore to give their fathers. None of those who have despised me will see it. See, the punishment for rejecting the way that the Lord was leading was for an entire generation. An entire generation was denied the opportunity to enter into the promised land. 40 more years of desert wandering. That was their fate. 40 more years of it. It wasn't until the last of that older generation passed away that God says, now you may enter into the land which I have promised. Around 1,500 years later, Jesus Christ made a way for mankind, for me and for you, to enter into a new kind of promised land. He made a way for us to experience true and lasting peace. He made a way for us to gain that which was unattainable before. He made a way for us to experience the fertile land of following after him. He led us from the wilderness with his life, death, burial, and resurrection. And through the sacrifice of Jesus, we have the opportunity to find our true and lasting wholeness. We'll be able to find it in a relationship with God through Jesus Christ by trusting in Christ's finished work on the cross and not in our own best efforts and religious checklists, but by simply telling him, I want you to rule over and reign over every aspect of my life, every aspect of my heart, by handing the keys over to him and saying, I need you to redeem me and to restore me. By daily turning our will over to him, we are saying, I believe more in your strength than in my weaknesses. See, fear of the unknown, fear of our own weaknesses, fear of their own abilities there in the Old Testament, and a complete lack of faith in God caused a whole generation to miss the blessing of walking and living in a land that God had promised. This morning, I'm going to ask you, is your fear keeping you from the better land that God has? Is your fear keeping you from walking in the paradise of God's plan for your life? Some of you this morning have been wandering through the wilderness for a long time. You've been struggling and you've been doubting and you've been hungry spiritually. Maybe organizationally you've been struggling. The spiritual journey of yourself or your church has been a difficult one. But now Jesus is bringing you out of the wilderness and he is presenting you with the promised land of trusting him and experiencing a life and existence that you could not and did not accomplish on your own. We've been given a golden opportunity to embrace and improve and change an unhealthy situation. But there is one thing that will stop us from moving forward, and that's fear of the unknown. Fear that's built from our own weaknesses. Fear of the future. This morning, for some of you, fear is keeping you from moving forward in your spiritual journey. And my heartfelt concern for you is that if you refuse to take those necessary steps forward, how long will it be before that opportunity comes again? Will we be like the children of Israel, where an entire generation had to die off before the church? I mean the people experienced the land of milk and honey that God was laying out before them. If this morning you are struggling to move forward on in your spiritual journey, let me pray with you real quick. Just join me in this simple prayer. God, you know the areas where I have the greatest fear. You know the things that terrify us. You know the struggles we face, but you are more than all of those fears. God, help us to put more faith and focus upon you than in our weaknesses. Help us to see that you're offering up your hand for us to follow you in faith into the land that you've promised. Help us to not revolt and return to a place of disparity and destruction. God, we want to put our faith in you through the sacrifice of your Son, that we might walk in the life of restoration and reconciliation that you would have for us. Thank you so much, God. Help us to recalculate away from fear and towards faith in your strength and your ability. Amen. If God has worked and moved in your heart in some way this morning, will you do us a favor? Will you just let us know? This past week, we received an email from somebody in Germany that shared with us how God spoke to them through the message of his word. And while that was an encouragement for us, it also enabled us to reach out and discover how we might be able to continue helping that person on their spiritual journey. And we'd love the opportunity to do the same for you. To do this, if you'll just simply go to www.killianbaptist.org/contact and shoot us a message. Once again, thank you so much for joining with us online for worship this week. And we look forward to gathering together in the weeks to come. Have a great rest of your day.